Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV with your host, Kyle Ellicott. I'm pleased to have you here today on Thursday, August 9th. We're joined by an outstanding cast of co-hosts from around the world and a part of the VCTV family as investors to speak together about what is happening when it comes towards the venture and investment scene in and throughout Europe. We're going to be talking just about that here. And as we know, according to PitchBook, already at this point in 2021, we have surpassed the total amount of funding in last year, 2020 alone. In the blockchain industry, we've seen almost $20 billion invested year to date in just one singular industry. And we have so many others that we're going to be speaking about. So pay attention. There's a lot to be broken down in today's episode. But before we get started, a big thank you and shout out to the LaToken team, to Maria and Hasmik, for making today's episode possible. Without them, we could not all be here on time and talking about subjects like this for you. With that, let's go ahead and give quick introductions to the Grand Master of Artificial Intelligence himself, ladies and gentlemen, who has joined us from the quantum realms of far beyond. Gary Fowler, welcome to the show. A little intro and a little background.
Sounds like a new TV show. Anyhow, my name's Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur investor. It is great to be here today. Great to see some familiar and friendly faces. I've done 17 companies. I've been involved in 2 unicorns. I was on the original management team of Click Software that was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. I also done an IPO on NASDAQ. Just love AI, quantum, and cybersecurity. Today, I'm the president, co-founder, and CEO of GST Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley. Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here as well, Gary. It's always a pleasure. Vandana, welcome back as well. A little intro and a little background, please.
First of all, I want to thank the entire team of LaToken for having me here, including yourself, Kyle. It takes a lot of efforts to create these VCTV shows and, connect people all over the globe. Coming to introduction about myself, I was in Singapore and Jakarta. I had my own family office in Singapore and Jakarta. I worked as an investment banker and advisor to family offices and angel investors in Jakarta, Indonesia, helping startups from a diverse background from Fin-Tech and B2B Tech all the way to consumer startups. I was raising funds for them and providing them with a range of services, just as Convanto does today. And after 15 years of staying in Singapore and Jakarta, I came back to India. I did investments for a bit and then returned to advisory. That is when Convanto was founded. Today, Convanto is one of the most well-known boutique investment banks in India, led by a female founder. Today, I'm also a venture advisor with Loyal VC, the INSEAD-led Canadian VC Fund, having a core portfolio of over 160 investments in more than 35 countries. I'm also a partner with GST Venture Studios, a Silicon Valley-based venture builder. Over the years, I've arranged funding for startups and growth stage companies in diverse sectors like EdTech, FinTech, consumer B2C and B2B, agri-tech, health tech, food tech, disruptive and deep tech, as well as non-tech sectors. And I would recommend all of you to kindly do have a look at my website for the wonderful testimonials written by my clients. This month, I've been selected as one of the top 10 women leaders in wealth management 2021. The article is on LinkedIn for anyone to have a look. My expert opinion is often sought by leading business news channels and publications like VCTV, Business World, and I've participated in almost 160 plus talks all over the world, which can be viewed on YouTube and VCTV streaming sites. I'm also connected with 300 investors globally. We are sector agnostic, and typically we do $1 million to $25 million. And once again, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Vandana. And Dr. Ingo, a little intro and a little background, please, about yourself.
So I'm Ingo. I'm an electrical engineer, and I do together with Kapakura, which is our company, impact investing. So we invest in early stage startups, especially in Europe, in the areas of education, healthcare, and environmental tech. And we do investments only in those companies that have a technical component, because this is something where we can add value that is beyond money. We are a European-based investor. And what makes us different from others, we help other investors to invest over us or with us together into the German market. And this means you can be an investment company that invests several hundred thousands of euros, but you can be also a single investor just wanting to improve your portfolio and manage your risks. So this is what we do, and we do this with technology. I am an expert in AI, and we use AI and data mining in order to select the best startups that we can find here in the European market.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Gianpaolo, welcome back to the show. As always, a little background and introduction.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me here today. This is Gianpaolo Parigi. I'm a venture capitalist, investment banker, private equity specialist, and entrepreneur. I co-lead 2 different private equity groups, one in California and one in London, England. And I'm a chairman of a single family office in New York, and on a board of several advisory boards of banks and international conglomerates from India to Europe to the United States. I'm also at present preparing a technology amalgamator in the European Union, and this will be open to companies, startup companies from all over the world. It's going to be a different type of accelerator. And for those of you who are interested to know more, you can contact me on LinkedIn later. Back to you, Kyle, for now.
Wow. Gianpaolo, I kind of want to ask you, I want to know more. I don't want to contact you on LinkedIn. I want to know more about this exciting accelerator that you're putting together. So I'm putting you on the spot. You can tell us, or you can push us off, and we can all contact you on LinkedIn.
Right on. No, absolutely. As if on cue. Well, definitely. I mean, we've been developing, I would say, a 21st century model that would allow a number of companies that cannot become unicorns, but have the possibilities to be quite successful enterprises in their own industry space to achieve the possibility of getting recognized and a voice in the market and generating traction. What we do is basically we work a lot on the genetics at the company level, and we don't bring in capital immediately. We bring a lot of intellectual capital first. We bring our Rolodex of global contacts. We bring order book. And last but not least, if they still need money after we're finished with the whole process, we would bring them capital directly through our own private equity funds and investments, or indirectly through our global network. And it's open to, I mean, we're already signed up with partnership in the US, Canada, India, Singapore, Germany. There are interests from many countries all over the world of, technology groups, strategic investors, fellow venture capitalists, primarily from Silicon Valley. And they were the first ones to notice what we're doing. And so, we've been operating in stealth mode for about a year, and we've been engineering the model for another year prior to the stealth mode. So at the end of this year, we are launching officially. And it's very, I would say, interesting that today we are talking about investments in Europe, because also we would add a little bit more of insight, I think, for those of you who are in the audience and are non-Europeans, of what the potential, the possibilities, and also the threats of such a continental market here are for non-European companies. Thank you.
This is great. Thank you, Gianpaolo, and I appreciate you going on the spot and sharing more about that with us. And kind of want to come back to you to kick us off around investing in Europe. I mean, we've all talked about Europe. We've lived in Europe. We've invested in Europe, or we've talked about it in some form or another over the past year together, even with Dr. Ingo as well. And Gianpaolo, if you could kick us off as to kind of painting that picture of what's happening in the venture capital scene around Europe. I know in different countries, different regions, it's very different, but we're also seeing a lot more capital, I would argue, this year than we have in years past. So give us your view and your on-the-ground perspective as what's happening investing in Europe right now.
Oh, yes, you argue absolutely correctly. And before getting into the venture capital proper, I would like to give just a little bit more of a general information of what Europe is today in terms of potential for non-European companies and investors interested to participate in the space. First, we have to consider Europe as a whole is a continent of about 700 million people, whereas the European Union as a sector of the continent is a space of about 490 million people. Europe, the European Union and Europe by additional information is the largest provider of foreign direct investments in the world and the largest receiver of foreign direct investments in the world. Europe received, the European Union alone, it receives about 9 trillion every year, and it invests abroad, overseas, about 7 trillion every year. And this is only the European Union, which is, of course, most of Europe, but not all of it, because, there's the UK, Switzerland, and some of the Nordic countries that are outside the European Union, but they are still part of the EEA, which is the European Economic Area. So overall, it's a major powerhouse, financial and industrial, and in terms of customers and consumers market. It's the wealthiest area by GDP in the world, and also by per person income, per capita income. So it's a market that has, compared to other global powerhouses such as the United States, China, and India, it has a lot of internal minute differences that need to be taken into consideration. Maybe the first and most obvious of them is difference of languages. There are, about 26 languages in Europe, and of course English is the lingua franca for business. But it won't hurt if you want to address some of those member states if you have people on board that speak the local languages, because of course it would give you additional advantage. The industrial production after COVID has rebounded to a plus 20% this year, which is quite promising and encouraging. So we've seen that this long and I would say dramatic hiccup that we had with COVID is being absorbed by the market and by the system. We are not through it yet. There are talks that there could be, or rumors that there could be another fourth wave, in the fall. We are seeing, but in many countries of Western Europe, primarily Western Europe, at least 60 to 70% of the population, if not more, has been already given the vaccination jab. So, we count that the velocity of propagation of the virus should eventually slow down as a result of these policy and programs having been implemented. And coming now to venture capital, you're absolutely right. The venture capital is finally seeing the light of day in Europe. And, I come from Silicon Valley, having spent 10 years running a VC firm in Silicon Valley. And I was always very cautious, dubious, and also critical of the stance of the European Union as a whole in terms of venture capital, quote unquote, proper venture capital, because there was a lot of, hidden wealth in Europe that for some reason didn't find its way to the market in the same fluid way that it does in the United States. But I would say now, as a result of the recent, adaptations in the market and modifications in the structures of some of the, leading practitioners and boutique firms and global banks in the industry with their own offshoots in venture capital, I think definitely we could see that now, the battlefield has been made even. In fact, many of the Silicon Valley firms are looking at opening up shops in Europe. I mean, because there's going to be a lot of money in Europe. Not only the usual money that comes from manufacturing, from the service industry, which are tremendous, powerhouses in their own right in Europe, but also money coming primarily from our equivalent of our sovereign wealth funds. The European Union government that is going to put in the market in a few years, starting this year, about 7 trillion of investment on top of the trillions of investment that each of the member states are putting in the market already via placing of institutional country sovereign debt. So when you take a look at all this, Amazon river of money getting into the market, and this money will be primarily dedicated to technology sectors and to improving the quality of life and the environment and the climate change action and mobility and transportation in urban centers. In fact, our London private capital group is addressing investments in 7 areas that are very critical for the betterment of the quality of life in major urban areas around the world. We invest in food and water quality and supply. We invest in transportation and mobility. We invest in digital transformation and the overall of legacy system. We invest in remote and distributed healthcare that could support and complement the activity of centralized healthcare of the hospitals and the traditional clinical systems. And we invest also in security and the tokenization of hard assets with a view to mobilizing and bringing more capital resources to sectors of the life in urban areas that are needed the most. So, but primarily to address also, the imbalances existing in the urban areas, not only in the, let's say, the most advanced economies in the world, but also we are, keen to target, intervention in areas of the world that are considered as emerging countries or frontier countries.
Mm-hmm. No, this is great. I mean, you mentioned a number of industries. We've seen a lot of initiatives, especially like in additive manufacturing or manufacturing in general, starting to take shape or reshape in the northern parts of Europe as well, versus we saw trends before where it was moving into Asia. It's actually coming back in certain respects as well. You mentioned mobility, smart cities, a number of other, and healthcare as well. Gianpaolo, you painted a great picture. I mean, Gary, anything to add? You've got GSDV, GSD Venture Studios that's investing in and throughout the region of Europe as well. Are you seeing anything different than what Gianpaolo painted? I mean, Gianpaolo pretty much put out the landscape of what's happening, and sounds exciting and much more of a growth for the European ecosystem than we've had in years past in an exciting way. But anything to add, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we have GSD Labs, which is an accelerator that's in 24 countries, and a number of the companies, Germany, the UK, I mean, literally most of the European Union, we've had some company through our accelerator. What we're seeing is a drive and determination. We're focused on AI, quantum, and cybersecurity. But what we're seeing is the quality of the startups are really good. But the one question that they have is the valuations, the European valuation. I've heard this, I hear it every week. And I don't know why that is, but it is. They're a bit more conservative. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, there's a great technology that you have, but let's use Silicon Valley as the starting point, as a port to the rest of the world. So we're, currently we have a company from the UK in GSD as a portfolio company that we're working very, very closely with. Actually, he was a founder of Scout24, which is about a $7 billion German company. We're working with him on his new company, Easy Life. So we're seeing those companies, and we're seeing a drive and determination. I also worked in Europe. I lived in Berlin a bit, and also Waldorf was doing some work with SAP, with Click Software, and also in the UK, I founded a company called Broadient and brought it over to the Valley. But I still don't see it, and I deal with a lot of the VCs all over the European Union. I just don't see them at the same level of funding and the same valuations that I do in Silicon Valley. And I'm not saying Silicon Valley, just so you know, is an end all, because I believe there's opportunities all over the world. But today, I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I want to come back real quick, Gary. You specialize in artificial intelligence and quantum, as we've talked about. I mean, from the artificial intelligence scene, how are you seeing that develop throughout Europe as well? Are you seeing more activity, less activity in Europe around artificial intelligence and kind of startups being funded there?
I mean, the situation, there's incredible talent, right? There's
Mm.
incredible talent. In fact, in one of the companies we have somebody that's from Cambridge Quantum. I mean, just
Mm.
incredible talent in Germany, all over the European Union. But the situation is, it's one thing of having the talent; it's another thing at creating a unicorn. It's another thing at taking the company global. So, and this isn't just a problem in the European Union. Just so you know, this problem happens all over the world because most of the time they're technology founders that have not created businesses before, but they're PhDs in areas like machine learning, uh, you know, deep learning, all kinds of things, and at the same time, it's there's an art and a science of taking a company out to the global market, and the contacts, as Gianpaolo said about living out in Silicon Valley. Those contacts are really important, but it has expanded with the COVID and the digital transformation. It has expanded a bit, but still the bulk of what we're seeing is that there's a tremendous amount of cash there, by the way, and also in the Middle East. There's a lot of pent up demand in the Middle East to invest in AI, quantum, cybersecurity companies, and they're invest anywhere. It doesn't have to be just the Middle East. I mean, they're looking for deals.
That's a good point as well. And Vandana, I mean, you've invested in over 150 companies globally. You know, being in Singapore and formerly Indonesia, and kind of seeing that spread and tie back to Europe. What else would you add in terms of investing in Europe and what you've seen over the past couple months?
Sure. So, the European startup market is putting up notable results for both early stage and super late stage funding. Now, a Deal Room reports that in the first half of 2021, some euros of 18.1 billion was raised by European startups in the form of rounds greater than euros 250 million. For reference, the entire European startup market raised about euros 16.7 billion in the first half of 2020. But there is also a solid data that indicates that Europe is doing a better job than ever in getting smaller companies off the ground. Now, the same report indicates that while Europe has created 15% of the new global unicorns since 2020, it created 20% of new Series A stage startups and huge 35% of seed stage tech upstarts, And Europe's tech sector has already attracted more venture capital investment so far this year than it did throughout the whole of 2020. And I'm not sure whether you regularly look at CNBC. According to data shared with CNBC, it is only expected to grow further, competing with US and Indian startups. And personally, I think investors are focused on sustainability will also find a lot to like in Europe. All of the world's top 10 countries are ranked by environmental performance, are European, with also Denmark topping the list. I myself am been appointed to look for an LP for a blockchain fund, which is from Europe itself. So you can imagine the kind of work which Europe has done.
That's absolutely incredible. Thank you very much, Vandana, Gary, and Gianpaolo. And wanting to be sensitive of everyone's time today, I want to come around for closing thoughts. And in today's closing thoughts, advice to those that may be making their first investment in Europe and/or maybe raising for the first time in Europe. And of course, where can you be found? Gary, let's start with you, Gianpaolo. We're going to close with you. So Gary, Vandana, Gianpaolo. Gary, closing thoughts, advice for either making your first investment in Europe or for those entrepreneurs making their first fundraising efforts based in Europe as well. And then where can you be found?
The European Union raised 26 billion or so last year. So it's about a third of the size of the US VCs today. But there's they're growing interest, growing demand. There's a lot more accelerators that have really focused on nurturing those early stage startups. There's more of a less conservative outlook, so that's great. And there are a lot of incredibly talented folks that are in areas like artificial intelligence and machine learning and quantum, some of the best in the world. So it's a bright future. It's just a matter of, it's going out. It's not a matter of having it. It's like having a Ferrari in the garage. It's about whether or not you can get it on the track and run it, and whether or not anybody else knows what you have. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm really optimistic about it. You can reach me, Gary Fowler, on LinkedIn. You can reach me, Gary Fowler, on Twitter.
Thank you very much, Gary. Couldn't agree more. And speaking of the European Union, we also saw them enter as limited partners in venture funds as well. So we're seeing a lot more of that funding capital go in many places, as John Paulo mentioned earlier. Vandana, to you, closing thoughts, where can you be found?
Yeah, so Convanto is also looking at a lot of investors from Europe. We already have a tie-up with about 30 investors from Europe itself. We are looking for more investors. We are also looking for a lot of talent from Europe itself, especially in fintech, health tech, edutech, food tech. And it's a very, very large market. Not only that, it's very, very talented with all kind of tech skills. So I would highly recommend all of us here to have a look at this market as well. And I could be reached out on LinkedIn or my website, www.convanto.com. And once again, thank you for having me here, Kyle.
Thank you very much, Vandana. And Gary, Jean Paulo, close us out. Closing thoughts, where can you be found as well?
Thank you. Well, let's not forget the one item. I mean, China has lost about $1.5 trillion in market capitalization in just a span of a few weeks recently. American investors have been finally exposed to the vagaries of investing through American depository receipts into Chinese company, and they have discovered, the lack of accountability and a certain opaqueness in the accounting that it cannot be protected well enough through, the ADR investment. Part of this capital that was meant to be invested outside of the United States will inevitably find the route to go into Europe, because obviously it's the next safe haven after the United States. And maybe residual components might be going towards India and other parts of the world. And we're talking about an enormous amount of capital, because if you think the US, Europe, European Union, and China overall make about 70% of the global GDP, and India account for another 9% of the global GDP. So we're talking about 4 basically quasi-continental blocks that absorb over 80% of the total, revenue generation of the world. So, I mean, this is something also to consider in terms of strategic positioning. For example, with our group in London, we offer the possibility to foreign non-European companies to joint venture and partner with us to open up the market in Europe, get investments, get a base, even opening bank accounts here, because now, because of the new international regulations, it's very difficult to open bank accounts in Europe unless you're not based with substance in the continent and in those countries. And for many companies, it becomes prohibitive to have on their own operations. I'm talking about particularly startups. So we offer a program whereby we partner with them and we bring them in as locals, and we help them grow internationally and access funding here at European Union rates and terms. Having said that, I also agree completely with what Gary said earlier. I mean, in terms of VC proper, the United States is still, ahead of the pack, but Europe investors are fragmented over 4 major clusters. VC is only one component. The other components is constituted by strategic investors, because we have a plethora of European-based multinationals and even pocket-sized multinationals that are small cap and mid-sized cap with, I would say, terrific investment power and capability to deploy very quickly compared to even institutional investors. And other large components of the investments, which is not reported under venture capital, is actually provided by single-family office like ours and multifamily offices. So there's a lot of money that comes. And then there is, I would say, a non-consolidated group of ultra high net worth individuals and high net worth individuals that sometimes really not even on a family basis, on an individual basis, are committing substantial chunks of their capital to companies here. So the four sectors, all in all, are providing de facto what we would still call as private equity or venture capital, although formally it's not venture capital. And I'm Gianpaolo Parigi. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter, and you can find me via email at gianpaoloparigi1@gmail.com. Thank you for having me here today, and good night, everyone.
Thank you very much, Gianpaolo, Vandana, Gary, again, for your thoughts and insights. To our audience, definitely make sure that you reach out to everybody, myself included. We'd love to hear what you're working on, what you're building as well. But more importantly, if you haven't done so already, check out GSDV, GSD Venture Studios. And specifically, if you are in Europe and looking to work with the one and only Gianpaolo, reach out to him on LinkedIn to learn more about his accelerator program and what he and his team are building as well. Take that away today. Those are your two big homework assignments for this week as well. Everyone, big thank you again for tuning in. Big shout out as well to the LaToken team, to Maria and Hasmik for making today's episode possible. When you do reach out, please remember to add context, where you heard us, where you met us, what you would like to continue the conversation about. Everyone have a wonderful day. And again, reach out to Gianpaolo and to Gary on both of their accelerator programs respectively, and have fun enjoying success. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.